It's time for the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent ETA,
Agent Kruger,
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. Don't forget to check out our email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget all of our other wonderful links in the description on Linktree. This week's episode, the Ariel School UFO. Oh yeah, boy, dude. This is a good one, guys. So
this, like I was saying before, like this is one of those UFO cases where I was aware of it before I was even into UFOs. This is a big one.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. It sounds like it's one of those stapled UFO stories that you need to know if you know anything about UFOs.
Well, before we get started, I just want to say that this topic was actually suggested by Kokichi on Discord. So thank you so much for the suggestion. And also,
thank you.
Before we get started, we have a listener by the name of Ada Reich. They have a streaming stuff, I guess. They do streaming on Twitch and YouTube, and they are under the same name on all of those platforms, possibly other platforms. So it's ADARYKE Studios. So you can find them, check them out, shout out for them before we get started. All right, so let's get into it. Zimbabwe, Ruwa, September 16th, 1994. So as we were saying, this one is, there are cases, and then there are cases. This is one of the big ones. This is one of the few cases where I look at it and I'm convinced that something really weird. There's no way out of it. This one. There's no way to.
There's a lot of people involved.
There's no way to explain it away. There's no way to tell yourself that it could be a figment of the imagination. Something happened here. 100% something happened. And I mean, it looks like, we'll maybe talk about it in the conclusions at the end, but I mean, it wasn't a lost farmer, I'll just say that. It was not a lost farmer.
Yeah, it wasn't a lost farmer. It wasn't some random person that was like traveling some back road somewhere that just happened to have an experience by themselves. This was a lot of people. And, I mean, listening to like some of the testimonies and stuff too, like from like because obviously a lot of the witnesses, the vast majority of them with the Ariel School incident itself, it was all kids.
They were
they were all kids.
And kids traditionally, I think most people know this. It's kind of like one of those like immediate things where like, everybody kind of knows kids are not good liars. Not most of them, right? So maybe some of them, right? But like, when you hear the testimony from the kids and stuff, and we'll talk about that later, you get there is consistency here, right? We'll get into that as well, But like, it's a very interesting case, and like, there's a lot of believability here.
Kids are not good actors, right? And like, there's that one that one interview with that little girl. She looks so tiny. She must have been first grade. I don't know, and. It was Dr. Mack was interviewing her, I believe, and she's trying not to cry. You can tell she's trying not to cry. You can't fake that. Like I'd say like 98.
She's holding back her fear.
98% of adults can't fake that, let alone children.
Yeah.
Like it was just,
they can force it and they can fake it, but there's typically, you can kind of tell sometimes when people are trying to force something to happen.
Yeah.
And these kids weren't doing that,
And this is one of the cases where it's very, very important to not just read the transcripts or listen to the audio, but actually watch the interviews with these kids, because these kids are not making this up. What they're saying, they believe 100%. I'm convinced of that. So let's get into what happened.
Yeah.
This one, Also, by the way, this one was voted on our Patreon. The top tier gets to vote on the next week's episode. We had a couple of choices this week. Let me refresh my memory here as to what they declined. You guys are missing out, man. They declined the Malmstrom Air Force Base UFO, the Stephenville 2008 Triangle, Stephenville, Texas, and they chose the Ariel School. Man, that's a tough. That's actually a tough lineup there, man. So those are all really good.
It is
really good cases there.
It is. But it doesn't surprise me that people chose this one though, because this is an amazing case and it's a very historical case within UFOlogy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's somewhat modern. You know, these kids, they're all adults now.
Yeah. They're
all adults now. They're in their 30s probably, because they were kids in the 90s, right? Is that how the math works out? I don't know, 20s or 30s, something like that. But
I mean, there was a not a very wide range of kids. Like, what was it? It was like kids from the age of like 5 or 6 up until like 12 or 14, something like that.
First grade to 7th grade, from what I understand. Although I'm not 100% sure about that, but yeah.
Well, that doesn't mean the same thing in every country, though. Like, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, these people are still around. These witnesses are still out there, and there are plenty of interviews with them. Not all of them, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of them, I'm guessing they don't want to be interviewed. They just want to live their lives on, okay, leave me alone. I don't want to talk about that UFO shit. I'm assuming, because they weren't in front of the camera. And I have to assume that the people, you know, doing these interviews and making these documentaries would seek these people out, obviously. And I'm sure they're not like that hard to find. So anyways, let's get into it. So as I said, it was September 16th, 1994 in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, which is, in case you have to refresh your memory of geography, Zimbabwe is in Africa, and it borders South Africa to the north, which I remembered that it was in Africa, so I'm not a complete dummy, but I forgot exactly where it was in Africa. I actually had to look that up. So it's in the very south part, bordering South Africa. And the area we're talking about is in a rural farming area. There's like not a whole lot going on there. It's fairly remote. And the school itself, the Ariel School, is a private school, or was a private school. It's still there today, but I don't know if it's still a private school or not. So the student population was mixed. They had, you know, as you imagine, Africans there, but they also had a lot of white students as well. And it being a private school, these were probably families who were living in the capital to the north, which is Harare, I think. And they interviewed people, and a lot of them, well, some of them said, yeah, like my parents are missionaries here or whatever. It's not clear exactly who's there for what reason, but there are definitely
there's
people.
A lot of farmers' kids there too.
Yeah. So that some of the people there are definitely not native to the area, right? All right. So before the incident we're talking about, before September 16th, some accounts say the week before, some accounts say the 3 days or 4 days preceding. Either way, there were a lot of UFO sightings in the area in the days leading up to this event. And there was
activity.
There was even an account where somebody, like a truck driver, saw an extraterrestrial being, or, you know, a strange creature. We don't know for sure that it was extraterrestrial. It could be just, you know, from the middle of the, you know, from the hollow earth. I don't know. You know?
Yeah. Well, most of the sightings that I heard of, like, were from like the 14th and the 15th. Like there was a couple days before this actually happened at the school. And they were actually around the whole area, like in multiple different countries. Like there was reports from Johannesburg, South Africa. They're from Botswana, Zambia, and these are all surrounding areas, you know, within this area. And a lot of them, from what I had heard and from what I've seen leading up to this, it was you know, orange, like orbs in the sky. People claim to have seen, you know, like groups of like shining bright lights that did not look like planes. I've seen a couple of different descriptions of crafts that people had seen in the sky that they even said that were too big to be a plane. So like it seems to me like a lot of the area, like they were already on high alert almost. You know what I mean? Like stuff had been happening so recent within that area of Africa. and it was almost like what would you call it? It's a flap, right?
Yeah, it's either a flap or a wave, and I haven't been able to tell why there seems to be no difference between the two, and sometimes we use one and sometimes we use the other. It's either a UFO flap or a UFO wave, and I haven't been able to determine the difference yet.
But there's a lot of activity leading up to this. Sorry. It's kind of a weird situation that, that leads up to this,
Yeah. One of the local news outlets, ZBC, said that they were getting hundreds of UFO reports in the days leading up to this event. So that's just the news outlet. So people were seeing weird stuff all over the place. Some of the sightings were just a couple of examples were UFOs flying in a pattern, a flying oval, orbs of light, and there's even an airline crew that saw and reported UFOs, and they reported it to the Johannesburg airport. But looking up those sightings in and of themselves would be worthy of a whole episode, I think, at least one episode, just to report on all of those sightings. But let's get to this particular one that we're talking about. So at 10 a.m. At September 16th, again, 1994, the students were out playing and they had an extended recess because the teachers were having some sort of meeting or conference indoors, which is unfortunate that apparently all of the adults were inside. And this is somewhat unusual, but when you hear the interviews, like some of the older kids said that, yeah, we saw the younger kids were upset, so we ran over to, make sure they were okay. That's not where I went to school. Where I went to school is more like, there were no adults around, so the older kids went to beat up on the younger kids, It's, it's a completely different atmosphere. But yeah, you get the impression that the older kids really were concerned about things, and it was a lot more orderly, and they didn't necessarily need an adult present all of the time, But anyways, the teachers were inside having a meeting, and the whole event, the UFO sighting, lasted approximately 15 minutes. So that's what we have is an approximate time frame, but according to a lot of the witnesses, that's really hard to pin down. But that's what, the adults will say as well, is that it was about 15 minutes. Now, some places say that it was either 62 or 64 kids that witnessed the UFO, but there was a lot of kids in the area apparently didn't see anything. But if you listen to some of the interviews, it's pretty clear that actually a lot more kids saw it, and the number is probably well over 100. So it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, what's the difference? 60, 100? It's a buttload of kids saw this thing,
Yeah, 10 people.
So there's a couple of different descriptions given, and they don't necessarily conflict with each other. It's just different ways of describing something. So some kids described seeing a silver disc in the sky descend and land in a field just outside of the school. So a lot of them didn't see it, or at least as far as I could say, in their testimonies, they didn't say that they saw it land. They just looked over and saw it sitting like amongst the trees or over there just outside of the boundary of the school, so they didn't necessarily see it come down. One interview, the student said they saw a flash of light, bright silver shot past. And a lot of them said they saw something silver amongst the trees. And they described the object as, your typical flying saucer, but a lot of the kids, a lot of them, as adults, when you see the adult interviews, they said, we weren't aware of UFOs or aliens or anything. And that's really apparent when you listen to their interviews when they were children, the way they describe things. So they'll describe things like, oh, it had this thing on it here and it was over there, and like these really vague descriptions. And one of them said it had like something around the sides, a platform around the sides, they called it. And that would be a flying saucer with like a little edge around the sides. But a kid who doesn't know what a flying saucer is, that's how they would describe it, perhaps, Another description is a big round ball with a flat bottom, a silver oval thing that flew past really slowly. And one witness said, I saw the bigger one and the spaceship like 4 or 5 of them. It was red and green and yellow. Another one said, now this one was interesting. They said it looked like a big rock in the trees. It didn't look like a smooth metallic object. And they described it kind of like, it seemed to me anyways, like it was trying to blend in with the scenery. Like it was trying to camouflage itself, which is really weird. But that could explain why there was a little bit of confusion as to how to describe it. Because if it was sort of, let's say hypothetically, this was some kind of ship with a cloaking mechanism, and that mechanism was maybe malfunctioning, and it was sort of like glitching in and out, and it kind of looked like it blended in, but then it didn't, kind of a thing. I don't know. That one, that description really kind of tripped me out.
Yeah, or if it was coming from like a different dimension.
That's another, that's some of the descriptions that we'll talk about definitely seem like it could be some sort of, I don't know, interdimensional something or other going on. It gets pretty weird.
And that's a pretty popular opinion also of like what aliens actually are for a lot of people. Is it like, obviously from one solar system to another, one galaxy to another, wherever an alien race may be coming from to visit here or whatever, if they are doing that, point A to point B travel isn't necessarily reasonable, right? Because the distances are so very vast. It just wouldn't make sense really, to travel like that. It wouldn't be efficient, right?
Well, so it depends. It depends.
Yeah.
It wouldn't.
I guess it depends on what kind of technology you're using. Right?
It wouldn't be practical using our own technology. But if you remember I think it was the time travel episode when I talked a little bit about our understanding of certain physics principles. So light travels at a certain speed. What is like 384,000 miles a second or something like that. But that's from our perspective. From its own perspective, apparently light travels anywhere in the universe instantaneously. Just wrap your head around that. So depending on your perspective, your speed of travel changes. So if you're traveling at the speed of light, you can go anywhere in the universe in an instant.
Yeah.
Distances
that's a good point.
Distance becomes meaningless. You go wherever you want to. So if you had the technology to harness the speed of light, you could go anywhere you wanted to, and you just think about how primitive we are. It's barely 100 years ago that we started flying around in airplanes. So to say
that's arguable.
Yeah, but let's not get into that. Let's just say that we started flying in the early 1900s, right?
Yeah.
So let's hypothetically, if that's the first time we flew, then, or maybe late 1800s, if you count like airships or whatever, it doesn't matter. So we haven't been, in the grand scheme of things, we haven't been flying for that long at all. Like we barely figured out how to fly. And now all of a sudden we think, okay, we have mastered all there is to master. I don't think so at all. The other day I was talking with Agent Egg about astronomy, and we were talking about our dogs. And I was like, yeah, the dogs have no concept of what the stars are. It doesn't mean anything to them at all. They have no way of even interpreting that. It doesn't mean anything to them, So what is there out there? There has to be stuff out there that we have no way of interfacing with. We can't interpret it ourselves,
Sure.
Just like the dogs have no way to know. They look up at the stars and they're like, yeah, whatever. Those lights are always there. They don't know what that is. They don't know what the universe is. They don't know what the speed of light is,
It's a weird thing too, because there's a lot of parallels there to draw with like archaeology and stuff like that, or just like people who consider themselves a historian, whether they be academic or not. Like a lot of these, a lot of our experts, quote unquote, like to think, that we know everything. We already know so much, right? Well, in reality, I'm aligned with your opinion there that we may not know even 1% of what we could, as far as like knowing stuff about the actual makeup of the universe and what reality even is, We don't even know if we're freaking receivers of consciousness, or if we create consciousness. We don't know that. Like, you know what I mean? We don't even know if we're in a simulation. Damn it. It's like
they don't even know how gravity works,
Not really. Yeah. Right.
They don't know how gravity works. Yeah. Just wrap your head around that. As advanced as we think we are, we still haven't mastered the basics of physics. There's still so much left to discover.
Yeah. So I guess my point is, we think we're so smart, but really, I'm in the opinion of that we really probably don't know diddly squat. What I mean? Have we learned quite a bit, throughout recorded history? Sure. Yeah. But like, we don't even know our own damn fucking history. Like, human history. We're even within recorded history, there are so many discrepancies. You know what I mean? Like we don't know what, we'd like to think we do, but we don't. Not in my opinion, at least.
Right. We've made quite a lot of discoveries, and we've achieved miracles of science over the last century or so, and even going back further, depending on how you want to look at it. But as far as technology goes, we're basically still children, in my opinion,
Sure.
And during my lifetime, I've seen us go from, the Atari 2600 to now I have a supercomputer in my pocket, So
oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Just the change within my lifetime has been absolutely astounding, just mind-boggling. But
yeah,
we're still at the beginning. But all right, anyways, where were we?
I don't even remember now.
I don't know. That's what happens when somebody makes a ruckus in the other room. It's totally distracting,
Yeah, we kind of got off on a tangent there.
That was a good tangent, though, man. I think that was a decent tangent. I like that tangent. But anyways, let's get back to the Ariel School UFO, I suppose. All right, so one of the weird things is that the children reported hearing a sound when the UFO landed, or as it was on the ground, hovering above the ground, or whatever it may be. One child said it sounded like somebody was blowing a flute, and she said that she was afraid of the noise and ran away. Others described it like the sound of an electric station, like a substation or something, sort of like a zapping electricity sound. And they said it sounded like it was coming from everywhere, which is, I could see why they would be a little frightened by that sound.
Yeah, that can definitely make an impression on you, And from some of the testimony that I had seen also, it seems like a lot of the younger children had ran away, but some of the older school children, I guess, like were more curious about it. And so they kind of started to approach
sure.
the vehicle.
So one of the older kids said that they were just doing their thing, and they hadn't noticed anything unusual going on. And then they heard a bunch of the younger kids actually sounded like they were upset, and then they ran over. And that's sort of what drew everybody's attention over there. And then what happened was, when they saw the entity, or, the unusual little man got out, the little kids, most of them got frightened and ran away, but the bigger kids stayed. And some of them, sort of the way they talked, it sounded like they felt like it was their responsibility to sort of stay there and make sure that everything was okay. They felt like they couldn't run.
Like protect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they described...
and
oh yeah, go ahead, ETA.
No, it's all right, go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to kind of comment on that, but...
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So they said that different witnesses said they saw different numbers of entities, between 1 and 4, but most of them, from what I could find, said they just saw one, but they were creatures they had big eyes, and they were dressed in like black, and like the black was like either like a deep black, or, like they didn't say that like he had like buttons on him or something, or like a suit or coveralls. Yeah. They said he was covered in deep black, and a lot of them referred to him as being like a black person, not like an African black, but just pure black, except for the face, which was like very pale. And one witness described it like the skin looked like it was plastic, and she said it looked like somebody with a bad Botox job. Like the skin looked sort of, sort of not. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
Translucent.
Yeah,
like a bat one, like just you can see the veins, and it's just pale.
I don't know if there's any. Didn't see any veins in the description.
No. I was just saying, not what she said. That's important.
But yeah,
I was saying,
but it just sort of
like that.
Sort of creeps me out just thinking about it. Like you just think about, some of those bad Botox jobs, and just think about like a whole face that looks like that. It's weird, man.
Well, they were definitely freaked
Just
out about the
think about
faces
Madonna.
because I heard some of their testimonies, saw some of their testimonies, and like they would talk about how like the eyes were lower than like regular humans. Like, and one of the actual kind of cool things about this case is like there's videos where you can see like groups of the children giving testimony all at the same time. Like,
and
like
drawings, everything.
Well, and the drawings too, and they all drew very similar things. And they were all in agreement, you know what I mean, with each other. Like you could see that they weren't like sitting there trying to like discuss like what we saw, you know what I mean, or what they saw rather. They all agreed, and they all were like kind of, it's like some of the interviews I saw with the kids when they were sitting down in a group and they were being questioned about this stuff. It was kind of like a rolling commentary where like they were all kind of adding on to each other, but they're all in agreement. Like they all were saying the same thing, you know what I mean? And like you didn't see really, I didn't see anybody like disagree with each other as far as like what they claimed they had seen. Like there are some little bit of differences and stuff here with the testimony. Like we had mentioned, some kids say they had saw one person, one alien, whatever it was. And others say that they saw a couple different ones, but for the most part, as far as what they saw, what this creature or these creatures looked like, they all agreed with that. You know what I mean? Like how we had already described it, right? So, it's kind of one of these things where, like I had said before, before we started the show there, when we were talking about it, kids are not good liars typically. Not in my experience,
Right.
and like you can tell when a kid is like taking extra time to try to make up something, you know what I mean? But that I didn't see that here, you know what I mean? When I see these interviews and when they're describing, you can see like the I wouldn't call it excitement, but like the energy that they have, like in the stories that they're conveying. Like you can tell, like they're not sitting there thinking about like what to tell you, as far as what they saw. I mean, they're just blurting it out, and like they're saying, no, it was like, yeah, we saw all these different colors, in some of these vehicles, and it's pretty consistent, is what I'm saying, So
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that it really adds to the believability of the story. I mean. Obviously, they're all out on recess there, right? And because of the situation, they didn't have any adults out there like monitoring them, so we don't really have, besides like the stuff that led up to it, like the days before and like the time before where you have like different alien sightings and stuff leading up to this around the whole area, not even in the same country, like I mean, so like, but like besides that, it's there wasn't any adults at the school that saw it from themselves necessarily.
Yeah,
But
the
you- but-
believability of this is very high too. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the location for this to happen. You wouldn't be thinking to yourself or assuming that, oh, this is just a cash grab. You know what I mean? Oh, they do this stuff all the time. You know what I mean? The area,
Yeah.
it's poor and this and that. Like they're just
Well,
trying to
it's
get
not
money.
like
But it's
not like any of these kids or any the faculty members or anything like that have written books and tried to make money off of this. Like I haven't seen any of that.
that's where I was gonna go to, is that this
You know what I
this
mean?
wasn't clearly a publicity stunt.
Publicity?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having when I'm all congested, I can't talk normally. I can't talk never mind. Actually,
well, I can't typically talk very reasonably just in general, but
that's what I was gonna say. I'm just I'm airhead right now. But yeah, no, I think with I don't think these kids, the believability of it is very high, and it's really just it's fascinating and tremendously scary at the same time. But it's just why this location though? It just why this just remote random scenario?
Well,
I know we're not,
and that's a good segue.
answer, but
that's actually a good segue because some of the kids that were interviewed said that as the this entity or these entities like approached them, they telepathically communicated to them about how like technology is bad and what you humans are doing to your planet is going to end up putting you guys in a very horrible situation.
Before we get started on there, we have a little bit more descriptions to talk about the aliens or entities themselves.
Oh yeah.
So there's a little bit more descriptions I wanted to get to, because some of the children described that they say that the aliens were there. And sometimes if you read about it, they'll say, oh yeah, they just came out of the ship. But how? How did they open a door in the ship? But it turns out, like, if you listen to the interviews, they'll say that like they didn't see them come out of the ship. They just saw a creature like on top of the ship. They just saw him appear there, like out of nowhere, like almost as if he teleported there or something, right? And as far as I could find, I couldn't find any of them saying, oh yeah, we saw like a hatch open and he came out of the ship or walked out of the ship or whatever. They all just sort of saw the creature there, or the man or the woman or whatever it was. We don't know. But the description, by the way, in case you haven't clued in yet, it sounds like your typical gray alien, but none of the children described it that way, because we're talking about little kids here who they didn't even know what a gray alien was. They're just kids. But a lot of them emphasized the eyes. They said that it had huge protruding eyes that like would stuck out, out of their face. And some of the pictures, they drew the eyes like coming off of the head to like sort of emphasize like how the eyes were sort of protruding, and that's one of the most important descriptions that they gave. That was one of the major things they all agreed on. It also had short legs, a small mouth, and nose. Some of the witnesses saw multiple creatures, one of which had long hair. And some of the quotes, for example, is, "I saw the funny man with his eyes here," and the boy pointed to his cheeks, like next to his nose, indicating that the eyes were set further down where you would expect on somebody's face, or that they had a very large forehead, right? Saw a spaceship, and there were a few little ones around it. So that's another thing, is that a lot of the children saw multiple, UFOs or spaceships, not just the one. One girl said that she was about 1 meter away from the little man, or about 3 feet at one point, when the man walked towards them, which is, I can't even imagine. I'd be crapping myself.
Very close.
That takes some balls, dude.
Yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't sound like it's unique that this warning that they are, sorry, we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
It's just, they weren't aggressive.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but so a lot of the children were sort of mesmerized. One said, "I was engulfed in its eyes." Another said, "The eyes." And in that moment, however long it was, because I have no idea of the time frame, it was just mesmerizing. So a lot of them described it like this, where they were just sort of frozen in place and sort of hypnotized when they looked into the creature's eyes. And then when they looked away, the spell was broken. And the movement of the creature itself is really, really interesting. So several of the kids described the man like he was running in slow motion, sort of like a football. They said football replay, and we would probably assume that's soccer to us. But, like a slow motion replay for a sporting event. And when it ran, it bounced like it was running on the moon, but not as high or like slow looking, but just sort of like that look that it didn't have gravity. Another kid said that the little man was gliding like there was no gravity. He said it looked very fluid and flowing. And another witness that, in a documentary that I watched earlier today called The Ariel Phenomenon, said that, the man moved strangely, and she wasn't sure if he was there was one man being seen in different places at a different time, like he was just shifting or teleporting around, or if there were multiple men. And that description I find highly interesting. She wasn't sure if there was one or multiple little men.
Right.
That's crazy. Like, again, we get back to this, it's, I don't know, for lack of a better term, interdimensional sort of thing happening, right? And also, one of the witnesses said that the man was moving diagonally through the field, so they saw him come from the ship towards them. One of the witnesses said that he came towards them, but then suddenly disappeared and reappeared at the beginning of the path and moved towards them again, almost like he was on a replay, and did that several times. And again, we have this weird thing where it seems like the kids are seeing something that their brains just can't reconcile. Like it's happening in a different spatial dimension or what? I don't know. It's just really weird,
Mm-hmm. That's kind of a decent segue into the nature of some of these interviews with the kids. Is I feel that they must have been educated pretty well, because you can hear the way that they're talking and the way that they described the encounter and like the words that they were using and stuff. They seem like pretty intelligent kids. You know what I mean?
They were, and they were all more well-spoken than I am. That's for sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that's a very good term to use right there. They were very well-spoken, and that, to me, like that provides also to the more believability of their testimony, because they didn't seem to be like super freaked out. Some of them obviously had been scared in the moment and stuff, but when they were describing like what they saw and what they experienced, I mean, they're pretty matter of fact about what they're talking about. So what kind of an alien encounter would you call this? Would it be a close encounter like of the third kind, you think?
I think so. Yeah.
Right. Isn't that kind of where it would fall?
I'd have to review my Heineken scale. It's not something that I use very often, but that's,
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I always kind of found that kind of cool. Like, I don't know why I was ever interested in that. Well, I mean, it is interesting, right? So the first kind is like when you see something like in the sky, right? Like a flying object or something like that, right?
Yeah. So I think
there's no interaction.
right? Yeah. And I think the second kind is like a close, if you're close to the vehicle, and the third kind is if you encounter like,
I think the second kind is like if there's actually like physical evidence left behind, right? And the third kind is if you actually, I'm sure I can obviously hit up the Google machine or.
All right, so I just looked it up, and this is Heinek's scale. He has different classifications: nocturnal lights, daylight discs, radar visual, close encounters of the first kind, visual sightings of an unidentified flying object seemingly less than 500 feet away that show an appreciable angular extension and considerable detail. The second kind is a UFO event in which a physical effect is alleged. This can be interference in the functioning of a vehicle or electronic device, animals reacting, a physiological effect such as paralysis or heat and discomfort in the witness, or some physical trace like impressions in the ground, scorched or otherwise affected vegetation, or a chemical trace. And the third kind, UFO encounters in which an animated entity is present. These include humanoids, robots, and humans who seem to be occupants or pilots of a UFO. And then
robots.
Yeah, robots. And then there are subtypes given here, which I won't go over. And then there's extensions, which is, so the fourth kind, which is a close encounter of the fourth kind, is a UFO event in which a human is abducted by UFO or occupants. This type was not included in Hynek's original scale. And there's some more stuff about that. I'll skip that. And then the fifth kind is a UFO event claiming direct communication between aliens and humans, which I think they keep adding on kinds. Like I've heard of like Close Encounters of the Sixth Kind. Oh, I'm going to write a book and now it's going to have Close Encounters of the Eighth Kind, whatever. I don't think you really need the fifth kind. The fourth is enough.
That's confusing. Yeah, that's confusing because like didn't these aliens not communicate with these kids?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Well, they did, but with telepathically.
But they weren't abducted.
Yeah, it's
so
still communication.
Yeah.
Oh, they weren't abducted. Yeah, no.
They were not. But the thing is, you would assume that if they were abducted, there would be communication. But I don't know. It's sort of the scale, I guess, is sort of a general ballpark. I don't know. But anyways, that's what.
Well, not always. Like
that's what Wikipedia says.
I've heard of different. I've heard of plenty of abduction cases where like the person was just plain abducted, but like they never were in communication with the aliens. Like they were remember being in like something like a medical room or something like that, or a room where they were being experimented on, what have you.
Yeah.
But they were never in communication with their abductees.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually,
we're gonna put a lot of stuff up your butt right now.
Yeah.
There was actually, we were talking a little bit about the psychic stuff, and the general description is that there weren't any words or anything. There was no talking. It's all just images in the head, said one witness.
Mm-hmm.
So it was sort of like thoughts and ideas and images, but the witnesses seemed sort of like it was a jumble of things. It was they seemed confused about what the actual point of it all was. Just that they had these thoughts and ideas sort of inserted into their head, but they didn't know what any of it meant. They just sort of got like vague impressions of things, And a lot of them said that it had to do with like pollution and technology.
Yeah. And some of the descriptions, as far as these testimonies that we've heard from some of these kids and stuff like that, they felt like they were given like feelings, like they're almost like it wasn't words, like you said.
An empath, like an empathic like communication or whatever, where you communicate with feelings and stuff. Sorry,
yeah, exactly, yeah. Like no, they weren't
feel what
they weren't
they're
giving
feeling, basically. Like
they weren't given a narrative. You know what I mean? But they were left with these feelings and these notions. You know what I mean?
Dang.
Yeah.
I mean, the message behind, the job, if you will, was to inform us, though. That's scary. I mean, honestly, it's like, oh, it's amazing. Oh, a UFO visit. That's in itself. It's earth shattering. And I shit my pants, 10 times over every time. But when it comes down to like, with it being carrying a warning, that's something that like goes to the realm of, I would lean to believe that more than just a typical, oh, we ran into an alien type of situation. But I mean, I don't know. It's weird. I mean, I guess it would be important, and I'm not trying to try to poke holes in things, but it's like, I would wonder was this daycare or this school, was there anything having to do with any activists, eco activists, if you will, you know what I mean, like Greenpeace, or there wasn't a presence in that time in that area, right? So I mean, right, because that would be my only question is like, what would somebody encourage them to like make up this? Are they all the kids of people that are Earth warriors? You know what I mean? I don't think that's the case here. I'm just shooting shit out of there. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, taken care of. So, they need the earth to be, good. So, why not spread a message of, try to scare us, you know what I mean? Into getting, taking care of the earth, if you will. All right. I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah. So, they were given a message that we were doing harm to the planet and that we shouldn't get too much technology and stuff like that. One thing that occurred to me is, all right, let's say that you're in the local neighborhood within a reasonable distance of travel And you notice these monkeys started making bombs and shit. So what are you going to do? You're going to go and tell them, all right, we're ahead of you. Listen to us. Trust us. You don't want to do this technology thing. It's no good for anybody, except us, because obviously we have it. But don't worry about that. You guys just enjoy hanging out on your beautiful planet. Don't destroy it. Stop doing this technology stuff. Because, we don't want to compete. We don't want to end up competing with you, So, I mean, if you're going to take a pessimistic view, that could be it. They're trying to discourage us from developing technology because they don't want to compete with us in the future. That's one idea. I don't know. But that was not explicit in any of the descriptions. That's just what occurred to me when I was listening to these things is like, if you were a competitive race, you might want to send that message out. But what the kids were describing, were things like, ecological disasters and stuff. A couple of them said they felt like the aliens or creatures or men or whatever you want to call them wanted them to go with them. So one person said, one of the girls said, it was as if they wanted us to go with them. It was at that point when I snapped right out of the trance. When they broke contact or eye contact, the trance went away and the images too. So that's what a couple of the students said. They felt like that the creatures wanted us to go with them. Another witness said it was like in the world, all these trees would just fall down and there would be no air and people would be dying. I think that in space there is no love, but down here there is. And that was like a little girl that said that. And it was a really sort of an interesting perspective, that, I don't know. Yeah, it is a weird statement. Deep. I'm not really sure what to make of it, but it's still pretty interesting.
She's a fucking alien. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Yeah. So another witness, one of the boys, felt like they might attack. And a lot of the kids in general felt pretty fearful. And I wonder if they're all interpreting it in their own way. Like if, this boy, if his instinct was to defend everybody, he would be worried about them attacking. And if, the little girls, because this boy I don't know, it's hard to tell their ages. They all just look really little to me. But like, let's say the little girl who was afraid of being taken, maybe she was afraid she was being taken and she felt like they wanted to take her. And the boy felt protective, and I'm reading too much into it. But anyways, this is what they were describing. They didn't say that. I'm putting that there. They didn't necessarily describe it that way. But it just occurs to me that, you have these different witnesses describing it in slightly different ways. All of them or most of them felt fearful. There was one boy who seemed sort of excited about it. And, he said something in the interview like, yeah, he said, I knew that I'd seen something that nobody else had ever seen, so I thought that was pretty cool. That's not his exact words, but it was something like that, right?
Oh, I was going to say, like, that's pretty profound.
Yeah, but that's the only one I saw an interview of that actually didn't look upset about all of it. All the other ones looked like they were pretty unhappy about the whole thing.
Well, but they're kids. Like, they're going to freak the fuck out. Like, the girls, I just imagine them screaming most of the time. Like, this creature's coming up and you're like, what the hell is that thing? Oh, most definitely. It sounds like we did. I mean, some kids were scared. Some kids seemed to be, or some kid was excited. I'm just glad that nobody was abducted and nobody, never got to see their kid again. That's important, right? That's definitely good. But I don't know. What was the... Oh, sorry. Never mind. I'd be getting ahead of us if I said what I was going to ask there. But no, yeah. That would have freaked me out, though. As a kid, I would have been freaked out. There's nothing unless I'm going to be hurt or I feel like somebody's going to attack somebody I love or my friend, then of course I'm going to, sack up and try to like fight back, right?
I have no idea how I would have reacted to that. The first and foremost thing that I would assume is I'd probably, if I was that young, I'd probably shit my pants and then run away.
Right.
Probably. Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Not all in the same order, right? Like just,
yeah.
But I
An
would
order
say
that might surprise you.
Well, joke's on you. I shat my pants before you guys got here. Preparation.
You win.
Right? When it comes down to but the thing that's peculiar is that I'm just shocked that these kids were able to comprehend some sort of like entity or creature or thing, because you always hear how people will say, "Oh yeah, well, it's impossible to actually see a alien because if they showed up, they're from a different, universe, a different realm of reality
or
and
dimension."
Dimension. Would you actually, comprehend what we were seeing, or are we gonna go mad and crazy?
Yeah.
And
Well, I
implode?
guess it depends on what your opinion of what an alien is, right? So, do you think an alien is an interdimensional being, or do you think it's like a race of people, or some kind of do you think that they're
Well,
traveling long distances, or do you think that they're interdimensional? I guess is a two big things right there, right?
Well,
Like,
that's peculiar. I mean, like, would you say you anticipating their existence or saying, yeah, there is something out there of their nature, like that would better suit your brain for when you actually do encounter a situation like that? Your brain is gonna construct something for sure, going to construct something and give you a better like step, like an idea of what the hell to anticipate, what you're gonna see come out that spaceship or whatever the hell it might be. And then
yeah.
you have the people that are, God lovers, God fearing people. And, if they were to see that, they would just see pure evil or whatever the hell it might be.
Well,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
some people theorize that like aliens are actually like either angels or demons or what
Oh,
have you.
yes. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so like they theorize that we don't really know what we're looking at just to begin with, first and foremost. But like there's so many different theories on what an alien could be. You know what I mean? And there's also one of the things that I find kind of interesting is like the different experiences that people have had with abductions, and also experiences people have had like under the influence of like ayahuasca or something like that. There are some similarities between some of the stuff that they describe. For example, the one like thing, one of the things about abduction is that some people describe like being abducted and being like observed or having interactions with like reptilian type aliens or what have you. But that's also one of the things that people describe also when they're under the influence of DMT as well, the methyltryptamine,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and there's a couple of good, well, I mean, people that have written about this and have talked about this, like, well, like there are some similarities there. Graham Hancock is probably one of the first persons that I've heard talk about this, and there are others out there, right? And
Right.
but like I find that there are enough similarities there to pose the question: is it something that is possibly the same thing? You know what I mean? Like is it or connected at least? You know what I mean? That is a question that I think deserves some investigation, and I'm not going to claim to be very well read in it, but it is a interesting question, I think. You know what I mean?
Interesting to say the least. Yeah. But what I did hear, though, what really stood out to me, and I thought this was a tremendous idea, Agent ATA, was that we would take a week off of all our responsibilities, meet up as a team, and rent an RV or something, and go trip out in a month. Go drop some DMT, some fucking ayahuasca, go to the mountains, play with the stars.
If I'm going to do ayahuasca,
we'll live stream the whole thing for our viewers.
I want to really go do ayahuasca. You know what I mean? I want to have a shaman there, and I want to have a reputable. I don't know if I just pronounced that correctly. I'm not
reputable.
Whatever, dude. I'm not great at the English language, But anyways,
come on, man. Just because you're a book learner and you can read.
A book learner. Oh, you just cut out for me there.
Sorry, anyways, my mic is not doing so good.
If I'm gonna go do ayahuasca, I'm not gonna just go willy-nilly into it, because psychedelics is one of those things, man, in my opinion, where it's, you better tread those waters softly.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Gotta bring your A game. You gotta make sure all your ducks in a row too. I mean, you can't be going and dropping that stuff if something's bad in your life that you're something you keep thinking of.
Well, negative. Here's the thing. Like, if I'm going to do ayahuasca or something like that, it's going to be for, I'm going to try to be, I'm going to try, I'm doing it because I'm trying to better myself. You know what I mean? I'm trying to get some benefit out of it. You know what I mean? So if I'm going to do it, I don't want to, I'm not doing it for the fun of it. You know what I mean?
No, we're doing it up in the mountains at the highest peak we can get to.
Well, no, I'll be doing it. I'll be going down to South America and doing it in the freaking rainforest. And I want a good shaman there to lead me upon the right path. You know what I mean? Because I know it's one of those things. It's like ayahuasca is one of those things that has become within the last decade or so kind of trendy. So from what I understand, there are some shamans they're just trying to make money off you. They're not trying to really help you. You know what I mean? And
I think Agent Kruger is more interested in something like. So I heard that in Canada, cocaine is now legal.
Cocaine.
So that would be a fun night trip, I guess. I mean, I've never had cocaine, but it sounds like a lot of fun. I'm
good on that.
It was all popular in the 80s and stuff. But anyways, all right, let's get back to the Ariel School UFO. That was
okay. Good at TJ, by the way.
Little bit of a tangent there. We'll get maybe
we're lucky we have Angie Anderson here to bring us back on track.
Keep us on track there. So. Yeah. So back to the UFO event. That was pretty much the main idea of what happened. And then after those psychic messages, it's not really clear how the UFOs left, but they just kind of left, like they disappeared. Right. And
yeah,
I get the impression that the kids at that point were so freaked out that they weren't really taking, notes at that point. So none of the witness statements that I saw were all that clear on how the UFO actually left. It was just sort of, okay, it's gone now or whatever. And a lot of the kids ran away screaming. One of the teachers said that over 100 kids just came screaming, running and screaming up to the area that they were in. And that's something that, kids are not going to coordinate by themselves, by the way. But so after the fact, a lot of the kids, some of them said that they thought that they had seen, aliens not from this planet, but some of them actually thought that it was, just an unusual man. And some of them said that they had seen Tikoloshes, Tikololshes, which I guess is some sort of creature from local folklore or, mythology. Yeah. And, like I said earlier, some of them hadn't even heard of UFOs or aliens before because they're little kids. They don't know about that stuff, So they just saw something weird and they didn't really know what to make of it at all. Now, the teachers at first, the faculty, they didn't believe any of the kids. And the principal did say at one point, he said that he believed the kids saw something, but he wasn't really saying what that something was. He just, he didn't go out on a limb or anything.
He trusted them because of the conviction in which they gave their statements. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like he was like, all right, I'm not going to sit here and say I believe in aliens, but I know that they experienced something because I can tell that they were serious about what they're trying to tell me. Right. And was that Mackey? Was that his last name?
I forget the principal's name, actually.
I remember somebody in there being named Mackey, and it always reminds me of that teacher from South Park, Mr. Mackey. He's like, he's always like,
well, there's Dr. Mack.
It's all up to you, okay.
The guy from Harvard.
Maybe that's why I was making that.
Dr. Mack.
You could do it. Yeah.
But
you live your life today. You don't have to spend your life on the streets addicted to smack. Homeless on the street, give him hand jobs crack. Right?
The principal.
That was a song. You remember that song? hey, dude, you can't just sidestep that.
Yeah, I just did. I sidestepped the crap out of that because we're approaching an hour here and I have to pee, so I want to get through some of this.
Hey man, so I've been holding my pee for a little bit here now already.
So the principal was saying that he felt, or in there, I felt when I was watching the interviews, actually, the principal seemed to be more concerned about keeping the parents happy than he was about the actual UFO event, you know? And that's sort of how the teachers seemed like they were more concerned about like doing their job than, you know, whatever the kids were freaked out about. Like they didn't give much stock to it. Judy Bates, who was the headmistress at the time and also lived on campus, she sort of did a 180. At first, you know, she didn't believe any of it or whatever, but in a documentary on UFOs called The Phenomenon, which was not the Ariel phenomenon, but a whole different movie, The Phenomenon, she actually was interviewed for that movie, and she came out and she said she wanted to apologize to the children. And she said at the time she was more concerned about her own experience, and she believed that aliens had visited that day. And she wasn't super specific, but it sounded like she was saying, okay, I'm sorry. I was just trying to cover my own ass in this situation, and I should have been more genuine and just more supportive of the students in general and what they saw. And she seems like she really believes what the students said was, you know, she believes what they said was real. And that's actually a really important takeaway from that movie, because that was, you know, an interesting little bit of, you know, like we have a witness here who says that basically more or less admitting that she had lied in the past and downplayed stuff, you know? So that's pretty important, I think. But the teachers, at first they didn't really believe what the kids were saying. And the kids went home and told their parents, and their parents didn't believe them either, because, I mean, you know, come on. But the parents came to the school the next day to discuss with the faculty what had happened, because their kids were freaked out about something, right? So it was reported, the event was reported to the ZBC radio, and this led in general to sort of a media frenzy with all sorts of different reporting on it, and it eventually hit the international headlines. Nobody really took it seriously, though. It was basically a big joke for everybody, except for the BBC had a correspondent in Zimbabwe named Tim Leach. He was a war correspondent that had been covering, you know, fighting in the area. I guess in Zimbabwe, it was a really bad time as far as violence went. And he was there sort of covering that stuff. But he went to cover this particular incident, and he was one of the very few people in the media who actually treated it seriously. And he is quoted as saying, "I could handle war zones, but I couldn't handle this." He said in interviews that he was just really freaked out about the whole thing, and he didn't know how to understand it. You know, he could understand people killing each other because you could wrap your head around this, but this was something completely outside of his experience. So there were other people who were also involved in investigating this. The most prominent ones would be Cynthia Hind, who was a very prominent MUFON investigator. She was like the director for all of Africa, I think. She came to the school on the 20th and interviewed a bunch of the kids. Again,
and, you know, I saw some videotape of her, and she also had one of her like aides or somebody that was helping her out. And I don't know the guy's last name, but his first name was Gunther.
Gunther,
and,
Gunther.
Yeah.
Gunther.
And I don't know if you saw some of this video, but that dude's head was way too big for his body. And
he looks like an alien himself.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, is this guy a freaking alien plant? You know, like, is this guy human? I don't know. I don't know.
You thought you can play one right past us, right under our nose, huh?
Yeah. Hey, Gunther. Yeah. Well, what's going on with you, bud?
His last name is Hoffer, I believe.
Oh, okay. I just remember Gunther.
Yeah, he was.
But he was supposed to be like one of the technical advisors there, right?
Like he was assisting Cynthia with technical stuff because he knew how to do stuff like Geiger counter type deals and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he was helping her investigate. But she was a very prominent UFO investigator in Africa at the time. So she went to look into it, and she interviewed a bunch of the people, a bunch of the children there. Tim Leach he interviewed a bunch of the kids, and John Mack, a Harvard University psych professor who was a pretty big deal in his day, also visited the school to interview a bunch of the children, which, by the way, he sort of committed career suicide because Harvard professors don't interview UFO people. That just doesn't happen. That's really bad for your career. So
yeah, not if you want to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's interviews that I've seen in some of these documentaries where they have interviewed some of his peers who are talking about like, oh yeah, we're hoping that he comes back to us because he seems to have gone off a bit, like they're basically trying to say, we think he might be crazy, but he has tenureship, so we can't really fire him right now, but he's gone off the rails. We don't, we're worried about him, that kind of stuff. But it's kind of a strange thing because he was just investigating stuff. Like I said before, it's not the people that are crazy. It's that weird shit they saw was crazy, but somehow that means that the people who saw it are somehow crazy. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyways, that guy pretty much committed career suicide. He got involved in this case and got involved with interviewing a lot of people and abductees and experiencers in general and stuff. He wrote some books about it too. I'll mention one of them later. But those were the three main people that investigated this, but there were lots of other people who looked into this sort of a thing. Now, interestingly, a lot of the children were interviewed as adults as well, and none of them, as far as I could tell, changed their stories. This is interesting because if this had somehow been hoaxed, let's say there was one of the kids on the playground was really charismatic and they're saying, okay, all the teachers are in there doing their thing. We have an extra long recess. Why don't we all get together and pretend like we saw a flying saucer? Maybe they had seen a alien movie or whatever, and they just thought it would be funny. Well, eventually somebody would have admitted to that. Somebody along the line would have said, yeah, it was all bullshit. Sorry, because we're talking about like 100 kids here. We're not talking about like 3 kids. If it was 3 kids, maybe they might keep the hoax going. But because there were so many kids and all of the ones interviewed as adults stick to their stories 100%. They didn't embellish their stories. They just said, yep, what I said before, I said now, I remember it like it was yesterday. That stuff happened, Salma Siddiq, for example.
That.
Yeah, Salma Siddiq, for example, said, I stand by what I saw. There was no reason for any of us to make that up. And she said, I stand by what I saw, not I stand by what I said. So that word, it may be subtle. It may not mean anything at all. It might just mean that's how she said it. But if somebody was hoaxing something, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, I said that and I meant it. But she said, yeah, I stand by what I saw. And that's a little more firm of a statement to me because she's saying
it's more specific.
Yeah, she's saying there, I saw something. I wasn't lying about it then, and I'm still not lying about it now. So she didn't say she said something. She said she saw something. I thought that was interesting how she worded that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that.
Now, the teachers, like I said earlier, the faculty didn't believe the kids at first, but not about all of them, but they had the kids make drawings and write descriptions about what they saw. And a lot of the teachers were interviewed and they said, after we saw those pictures and we read those descriptions, we believed what they said because they were all talking about the same thing from their own perspective, And if you've ever read different things or different people talking about the same thing, there can be very wide variances in how they describe it, but you can tell they're all describing the same thing, right? And if they had all colluded to describe something, then it would be very different, I think. But this totally convinced the teachers, at least some of them, that the kids were being genuine and it wasn't some sort of prank or something. Now, there was one teacher I saw in an interview that refused to believe it and said that it had to be some kind of prank or something. But that was one holdout. He didn't believe it, but the other teachers did. And that's what convinced them, was that not just the drawings, but the stories, they all matched. You know, they had some they had some variance between them, but they all matched. They were all talking about the same thing from different perspectives, which I find very interesting, because these teachers, their teachers are kind of like secondary parents to these kids. They see them every day for hours every day, you know? And like, I know my kids, when they were very young, it's different now because they're older, but when they were very young, at the end of the school year, they would actually get really upset and cry in some cases when they're like, well, I have a different teacher next year. And they'd be like, well, do I get to see my teacher again? Be like, well, yeah, we could maybe visit sometime. And then they got really upset because they understood that it was over and that person was not going to be a part of their life anymore. So
yeah, because they were so very influential.
Those teachers know those children intimately, and they know exactly what those kids would say. You know, you go, okay, this guy's the joker of the class. This guy or gal is sort of the quiet type or whatever. So those teachers, they know those kids, and they know how those kids are going to react to different situations, you know? So that means, I mean, that particular part of it, that those teachers were convinced by the written descriptions and the drawings, to me, that means quite a lot. If you just really sit back and think about the teacher-student relationship, particularly for young children. It's different for high school, I think, but for young children, there's a much more intimate relationship between teacher and student there. You know, it's not just sit down, open your book, we're going to teach you something. There's a more personal connection, I believe, between the young children and the teachers at that age group.
And definitely on a more positive note too. All right. Yeah. Most definitely.
And for me, at least for most teachers when I was younger too, is like, it wasn't just sit down and listen to what I'm telling you. Is sit down, shut the fuck up. You know?
Maybe for you it was, yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah. I was kind of one of those assholes, like in the class. Like I wouldn't call myself a class clown, but I was always saying stupid shit just because I couldn't control myself, you know.
Huh.
Yeah,
I definitely heard class clown was definitely one word to describe you back in the day.
Well, there's
maybe, I mean, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe a little bit. I don't know, whatever, dude.
There's different teachers too. You know, there are some teachers who shouldn't be teaching, but in general, most of the teachers I had were pretty good. Although I do remember my third grade teacher. That's all I'm going to say about her. You know, probably really shouldn't have been, had no business teaching kids. She was just
is that an evergreen?
Yeah. She was just an angry old woman, you know, but
yeah.
But anyways, well, there's no point in getting into that. It's, you know, what's in the past is in the past.
Rather here nor there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So one thing that occurred to me when I was watching these interviews is that not all of the kids sounded like they were receiving psychic messages, but instead they were experiencing these intense emotions of fear and anxiety, and they were trying to reconcile this completely bizarre and out of place thing that they were seeing, and their minds were trying to interpret what they were seeing. Now, here's an example of an interview that Dr. Mack gave with one of the kids, and he did this thing where he would sort of lead them on. And this is one of the things the skeptics point to discredit the case, is they'll say, yeah, but Dr. Mack totally led the witnesses on, you know, and some of them were interviewed in group settings, so their testimony is unreliable, you know, blah, 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 to dismiss the whole thing. But I do think that some of them were led on. So he asks them, what do you imagine is his reason for visiting the earth? And the child said, I think it's something that's going to happen. Something that's going to happen, like what? It's pollution or something like that. And how did they get the idea of pollution across to you? The way he was staring. The way he was staring? Somehow there was a message about pollution from the way he was staring? Yes. So if you watch the interview, it sort of seems like he's leading the kid on a little bit. Like he's asking him these questions and the child feels like he has to answer the questions. And he's sort of like, I don't know. So it's this particular child didn't say that they got any sort of telepathic messages or anything. So I think a lot of them might be like that. Like they were just sort of led on a little bit in a certain direction, but some of them did explicitly say that they got these images in their head, but it could just be that they were in a very heightened state of fear and panic. So their mind could have just been like flipping out, you know, and it could be, let's say hypothetically, these are aliens. Let's say they crash their ship, or they have a malfunction and it lands here, and their cloaking device is sort of failing off and on. And one of them gets out while the others are staying behind to fix it. And he walks across the field, gives the kids a stink eye, and, says to them in his own way of communication, whatever that may be, says, hey,
stay in school.
You stay the fuck away from our ship, you little shits,
Hey, you fuckface.
Yeah. And the kids all just in their heads, they interpret that as these negative messages about technology or pollution or something. And that was not their intention at all. Their intention was to keep the kids away from their ship because
don't touch my shit.
Maybe they didn't want to injure the kids with whatever propulsion device, or maybe they didn't want them tinkering with the ship or whatever, so that's one thing I think about, and I don't know, one possible interpretation. I don't know.
And that's why you are an agent.
Yeah. I think about weird shit all the time, man. Just when I read about stuff, I'd be like, what if these aliens were, really what if they, had a broken ship and they're just telling the kids to stay away, who knows?
I mean, there has to be, like, in reality, I want to say, like, shit like that has to have happened at one point. And it's like, and then on their side of the fence of this whole thing is that they look back on it and joke about it. I think it's like, space college kids, if you will, you know what I mean? Like, they're just drunk, crashed here.
You remember when we went on that bender over to Earth? And we crashed next to that school.
Oh my God, we almost got caught. You remember that?
Oh my God. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much all I had on the case. There's quite a lot more details you can go into.
I would almost say part 2 of this, guys. Like this, there's so much to it.
You could look at all the witness statements in detail and you could analyze that stuff. There are the drawings you can look at, which you can find some of them online. Some of them apparently were lost, unfortunately, but those are really interesting to look at. And you can watch the interviews. If you do anything, watch the interviews so you can see how the kids are talking. And for me, when I watch those, I'm absolutely 100% convinced that those kids are telling the truth, just the way they're talking. And they just seem like they're genuine, they don't seem like they're telling a story. I've seen kids telling a story. I've seen kids goofing off. And like I actually taught a class at a middle school for one quarter or one trimester, whatever it was. I taught a digital audio class, and thanks. Wow. I don't want to do that again. It was not that.
How was that?
It wasn't horrible. It seemed like half the class didn't really want to be there and weren't really interested in learning anything. So for me, that made it not that much fun. But
they just weren't engaged.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could see some of them were there because they had to be, and they didn't want to be, but you could tell like some of the kids when they were goofing off, like you didn't have to witness them goofing off. You could just tell by their mannerisms that they either had just been or were about to be goofing off in some way, So,
not hard to read. Yeah. They're not,
Yeah. I mean, kids they're not good actors in general. Most of them are not. Absolutely. Certainly not a group of 100 of them are not going to be able to, maybe there'll be that one or two special kid that's good at acting. That's his or her skill in life, but not 100 of them at once. There's no way.
Yeah, right.
But
I agree.
All right. So let's talk about some possible explanations. Of course, the obvious one is, aliens ended up there for one reason or another. I hate to mention at this point, any skeptical explanations, because they're just so ridiculous. But let's go ahead and mention it just for the sake of completeness. There was apparently a re-entry of the Cosmos 2290 rocket that burned up over the area at some point and would have been a fairly spectacular sight. And that's what the skeptics point to. And they say, well, that must have caused all of the UFO sightings. But here's my problem with that. Sure, that could be the cause of some of the UFO sightings. But that thing did not burn up over the skies over the course of 3 or 4 days or even a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, thank you. Okay, yeah.
It's not
back to reality.
It's satellites.
It most definitely could have been the cause for some sightings.
Yeah,
that were claimed to have been seen,
but satellites,
not the whole.
They don't re-enter the atmosphere and take 3 days to burn up. That's not how this shit works, you know?
That is one successful heat shield. I would get whoever put that heat shield onto that ship again, and I would definitely.
And that also wouldn't cause a large group of kids to claim to have experienced a UFO landing and also having a direct interaction.
A dark robed individual getting out of that said debris.
Yeah.
Well, it does because the skeptics say that the re-entry of the Cosmos 2290 caused mass UFO sightings. So everybody was.
That's right.
Everybody was on edge, and everybody was experiencing a state of, guess what? Mass hysteria. And that's what caused the sighting. Mass hysteria, if you can believe that. So that's the skeptical, and I'm like, all right, could we try just a little bit harder? And I don't know. I go back to the good old standard. Like, look, you don't have to believe them. If you don't believe them, just say, I don't believe it. It's that easy. Just say, look, I don't believe it. Why go through?
Yeah, but are you sure you don't believe it?
Why come up with these absolutely absurd explanations for what was seen? Explanations that don't in any way, shape, or form match what was reported. It's just weird. Yeah. But one of the interesting things, one of the interesting points of discussion with this whole case is why would they approach children and not adults? My first instinct on this one is, how many cases have we looked at where an adult saw a UFO and thought, I think I'll pull out my gun and shoot at that thing, or something like that.
Right.
Adults are very violent. We've talked about a lot of cases where guns are involved, or there's in general, maybe not even a violent reaction, but an unfavorable reaction.
Yeah, shooting first and asking questions later.
For example, just look at all the UFO cases, sightings, at least, that you have, for example, an Air Force base or something like that, right? We're not going to react to that in an observant way where we're just trying to look and observe. If any Air Force base sees some kind of anomaly or what have you on radar or whatever it may be, they identify some kind of something that they need to go check out, right?
Yeah.
There is the potential there.
Somewhat familiar, guys. I'm sorry to cut you off. This was did this ever seem to have happened? I don't know, in Hollywood, with a floating object in the sky getting shot at by our marine, or our military.
The Battle of LA. We did a case
before,
on that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I was about to finish my statement there, but
I apologize.
I would have included that too. That was part of my. Anyways, whatever.
Please, I didn't mean to take your thunder. I'm sorry.
Well, you kind of did. No, it's all right for you.
Not even. What are you talking about? You can keep doing it. That's the beauty of our show.
It's all right.
Anyways, so if they wanted to make contact and they had attempted to make contact before and were met with, shotgun blasts or airplanes trying to shoot them out of the sky, they may have thought a better strategy might be to land near a school and try to talk to some of these kids. So this might be their attempt to communicate with us or form some sort of discussion
to influence youth.
Yeah, because youth, the kids are a lot less violent than adults in general, you know?
Yeah. Well, and they also are, that old general statement, the youth is the future, right?
Yeah.
And however, general that may be, that is true. Like, obviously, younger kids are going to be our future. And, if they could be influenced when they're younger, maybe they might be able to make a difference.
Yeah.
Or, make some decisions that could influence the future positively for a certain, reason.
Or what if another thing that occurred to me is, what if this is sort of like a reverse soft disclosure, like a reverse disclosure? So the aliens know that our society would not be able to handle their presence, but let's say that intelligent life is fairly rare in the universe. It's very uncommon, let's say. Maybe life like trees and animals and stuff, but animals that can make art and make movies and make music and that kind of stuff is fairly rare. So maybe it's pretty lonely out there and they want to make contact with us. Let's say that they know we're going to freak out because they've tested this in the past and isolated farms and whatnot, and we freaked out. So what if they wanted to acclimate us to their presence? So this is one of the ways they would do that, would be going to a rural area and making sure that they're witnessed by a bunch of kids that would then go and tell a bunch of adults about it, What if they had some kind of plan like that? I don't know. That's just a thought I had. But I mean, if that was the case, you would expect a lot more cases like this. But, oh, wait, there actually are a lot more cases like this. Maybe we'll get to them at some point.
Are you talking about April 6th, 1966 in, what is it? Was it Melbourne, Australia, I think?
Yeah, was that the Westall one?
You had a very similar situation where a UFO landed outside of another school there in Australia.
And there was actually 3 cases that happened near a school in 1977 as well. Maybe we'll get to all of those in another case file. But I don't know. It's just some of the things that occur to me is maybe they wanted to be seen on purpose. Maybe they were trying to get us used to them being here because maybe they wanted to have a conversation with us. And the only way to do that would be to first get us used to the idea that they even exist in the first place,
Yeah.
But what if we take it at face value, though? What if this is a genuine warning from another species? Let's say that they have traveled the galaxy and that they have seen the downfall of other societies in the past because of runaway technology, and they wanted to intervene this time. What if in the past they had a hands-off approach and they said, okay, we'll let nature run its course. And then it did, and that society killed themselves. And they're like, well, we could have prevented that, even though we don't believe we should prevent that. We believe we should not interfere. It's still kind of jacked up that all those people died. We should probably prevent that next time if we can. So what if that's,
if
this
they're
time?
Benevolent.
Yeah, what if this time they're trying to prevent that? And what if, because in general, human society collectively, we all have our heads up our asses and we just ignore it because we refuse to believe that there are other or more advanced intelligences out there in the galaxy or the universe? What if that's as simple as that?
Have you taken a look around recently? As for no, we definitely have our heads up our asses. There's no doubt about that.
But what if it's as simple as that? What if it's as simple as the fact that we refuse to believe that there is other life in the universe? So we ignore all of these things that happen, despite the evidence, despite the overwhelming evidence, we just refuse to believe it. And that's all there is to it.
There's something to be said about that. That's like a murder that happened. It's like they do studies on this where if like someone is in shock or in such a state of shock that they don't know that they're in shock and that they just kind of comprehend, you know what I mean? Or they just, their brain makes something up for them to be like, oh yeah, that's the way it is. That's how it's always been, Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like, I guess an easy analogy for this would be analogy. I don't even know if that's the right word, but when you look at
Stockholm syndrome type of deal.
When you look up at the sky and you see a cloud and you're like, oh, that looks like a face. It doesn't actually look like a face. It just your brain interprets it that way. So if you see something that you're unfamiliar with, your brain is going to try to interpret that thing.
And your brain will also fill in the blanks sometimes.
Exactly. Too. Yes, that's exactly where I was going.
To make reality make sense.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to state before. Yeah, is that it just to comprehend something, it just makes something up that you're just like, that's it. That makes sense. Duh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's not. I don't know if you could really compare this situation, but it's like that, and she was getting a lot of crap for it, but just like that whole those murders that just happened, and like that girl who was like one of the survivors there, she was there when it happened.
Who where, and when?
So
I am not familiar.
You guys don't. So it's about the 4.
I mean, there's murders that happen all the damn time, dude. Like, you have to be more specific than that.
Okay, I'll be more specific with it. So give me a sec there. So when it comes down to it, it's the most recent murder. With the one that was, and I'm trying to remember, it's so loose, but it's the guy who murdered his 4 roommates. There was 4 roommates that were killed, and I want to say it was not Idaho, but it was like he stabbed all of them, and then what's it called? The Washington. I'm trying to remember it right now, but yeah, no. Anyway, so the act was committed. This is what I'm trying to get to, is that the murders happened, but there was somebody there, one of their friends, that witnessed it. But then she didn't react. She didn't call 911. She didn't do anything for about like 8 hours because she was in a state of shock that she just didn't. She just kind of just ignored it and played it off. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that extreme circumstances at times makes us, try to come up with something to relax us and not make us panic. But I'll get back to you on that.
I don't know. I understand. Like if you grow up and you live in a bubble and you've never experienced something like this, and yeah, sure. Like I've had some experiences where, before I got into the career I'm in now, I lived in kind of a protected bubble, where I grew up was a nice area, and I wasn't very familiar with how bad people can be towards each other. You know what I mean? And once I got into the career I'm in now, I learned it was a steep learning curve. I'll just tell you that. It is real steep, and you'll find out real quick once you get into that kind of shit. Like people can be unreasonably cruel and brutal towards each other. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes there doesn't seem to be any reason for it either. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't make sense at all.
That's the Idaho guy though. Yeah, it was the Idaho murders. His name's Brian Kohlberger. Kohlberger. Yeah, he was like a lanky, tall son of a bitch. I don't know what nobody knows what his motives were, but he just ended up killing these 4 students that were just
sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes somebody turns out to be a horrible fucking person. And there aren't motives, there are, technically you could say there are, but to the reasonable, normal individual who is sane, it doesn't appear that there are any motives. But at the same time, for that crazy person who has some serious fucking problems, they may have their own motives, but it's not going to make sense to you or me. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Yeah, but
yeah,
whatever.
Right.
I mean, this has nothing to do with what fucking.
I was gonna say, let's go back to
back
to the topic.
Let's get back to the case. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I had on this one. At the end of the day,
we'll go to our opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I find it impossible to dismiss that these children saw something. I believe 100%. This is one of the easiest slam dunk cases there is. Like, there's no way to dismiss this one if you're willing to look at the interviews and the evidence and whatever. Something happened.
Yeah.
These kids saw something, and they're describing it the way they saw it. Was that aliens? I mean, I don't know. Sounds like aliens to me, but we don't know for sure that's what it was. And some of their descriptions sound very strange, and it's hard to take them at face value. But I believe these children definitely saw something completely bizarre, and I think there's a really good chance that was extraterrestrial. What do you guys think?
My opinion is that the totality of the interviews I've seen, whether it be a group of children, describing their testimony. Oh, excuse me, I had a burp there. Or it be an individual. I see enough evidence here, and I don't see too much discrepancies, not enough, in my opinion, to where I think that this, the whole group of people that are describing what they have seen, it's close enough where something happened here. It was a definite event that people observed, and these kids saw something like you had just said, right? I couldn't tell you, I wasn't there, right? So what do I know, right? But like something happened there, and they definitely observed something, you know what I mean? And it wasn't, a natural event. It wasn't something that was, it was, I think it definitely could have been aliens, man. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to try to say too many crazy things here, but I think, they saw something that was very out of the ordinary, and they tried to describe it the best way they could, and they were being honest about it. Like all this testimony that I've seen from these kids, it seems to me like they weren't trying to deceive anybody. You know what I mean? So I believe them. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't tell you exactly what happened, but I believe them that they saw something, and they didn't know exactly what they saw, but they were trying to describe it in the best way they could. You know what I mean? So I think it's, I lean towards it being an extraterrestrial encounter. I don't think it was on the side of paranormal. You know what I mean? It wasn't a ghost or nothing like that, right? Not in my opinion. So I think that they saw, something that landed in their area. They had an interaction with it, and that interaction didn't necessarily go extremely smooth, it could have been better as far as whatever it was that landed there, that they, if they had a message to send, then they could have done a better job, in my opinion. You know what I mean? But
yep.
But I think these children did see something. They interacted with something. I'm not a psychic, so I couldn't tell you exactly what that is. But this is one of those interactions where, to me, the amount of kids, the amount of people just in general involved with this whole case, I don't know how this is this is a big case. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a big case when it comes to UFOs, when it comes the whole deal, right? So, but I don't know how this is like one of those things where, in my opinion, this should have been like a breaking worldwide story. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how this, to me.
Well, it was.
I feel.
But nobody took it. None of the journalists took it seriously except for.
Well, exactly.
Just the one.
But but nobody ever takes this shit seriously. No, to me, it's frustrating. Like, you see some of these stories sometimes where it doesn't matter the amount of information you have attached to it. doesn't matter how solid the testimony is, or the people who have experienced whatever they experienced. Like when it comes to UFOs and stuff, there's so many people out there that just like they just refuse to accept that this could be even one iota of a fucking 1% of a real event. You know what I mean? Like they're like, oh no, if UFO or anything like that has any, if that name is attached to any kind of event, they're just not going to be willing to believe anything.
Well, and it's frustrating too at just how inaccurate the media was. Like the journalists,
Yeah.
You can go look up the headlines or whatever, or you can go see some of the news reports, and they'll say something like little green men reported at a school in Zimbabwe. But guess what?
Yeah,
not
just that
single
one quote.
Not a single one of the damn kids said anything about little green men. Not a one of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
They just that's my problem with journalists is they make shit up all the time,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, they elaborate, stuff like and I think part of it is like they don't want to be taken they want to have some kind of credibility to their own like career or what have you, So if they even write about any of this kind of stuff, they're going to immediately write the article in a way to like make this all seem ridiculous in general, because they don't want to be seen as ridiculous themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's just, I don't know. It's so frustrating because there's so much evidence that we have talked about, and I don't know. I wish it would be taken more seriously, is all, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know, to make a long story short,
And what if people could just wrap their heads around the fact that we're not the only intelligent life in the universe? How cool would that be if we could get to a point where we were no longer afraid or hostile towards aliens? What if they could just fucking land, go to the cafe and have a cup of coffee with us in the morning and just have a chat with somebody from another planet? That'd be fucking badass, dude. But
yeah, well, who knows?
That ain't happening in my lifetime.
On.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as far as aliens go, like who knows what is really going on there? I'm sure you've probably heard those theories of there are different races of aliens are in contact with different governments in this in our on Earth, and they have different things they're trying to accomplish. You know what I mean? So like you have your grays, right? I mean, you have your subterranean reptiles. But it's just like you have different races of aliens that potentially have different perspectives and have different things they're trying to accomplish. So who knows if that's true? Who knows how true any of that is? I mean, it's just like, who knows what is really going on? I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much of this shit could be possibly true. I mean, at the moment, all I can really do is just speculate on it, I guess,
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Agent Kruger?
No. I agree with what both you said. I totally do. I'd just be repeating what you guys said. So,
all right. Well, we're running a little long here, so let's call it quits for this episode. And could we get a keep it strange from one of the other agents?
Keep that shit strange, bitch.
Hell yeah. All right. Awesome.